Hello, good evening. Good evening, everyone. We are here at Connect Africa for another session to discuss, the United Nations General Assembly resolution on the Ukraine-Russia war. I have here with me two guests. Today we are going to discuss specifically the Horn of African countries' response or the votes in the UNGA vote of the Ukraine-Russia war, namely Eritrea, Ethiopia, Somalia, and some of the other countries also in the region. I have here with me Abdurrahman Mohammed Ahmed and also Dr. Binyam Misgun. They're brothers from Eritrea, Dr. Binyam and Mr. Abdurrahman from Djibouti, but he was born in Djibouti, but he was all over. Yeah. So welcome, my brothers.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
It's my pleasure. Just to say briefly about my guests here. Brother Abdurrahman Ahmed he's from Djibouti, but he traveled and worked in most parts of the world. He's a graduate in international management and development, and also he traveled and worked in Africa, Middle East, Asia, and as far as Latin America. He's an expert in environmental governance and also on Horn of Africa. My brother here, Dr. Binyam Miskun, he's from Eritrea, but currently based in South Africa. He's a lecturer there at the School of Social Sciences, University of KwaZulu Natal, where what he teaches economic history and development studies. Welcome again. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
Yeah, so this is Connect Africa as a Pan-African platform where we discussed, what's happening in the continent and to look at what's happening, from the angle of the Pan-African point of view. So it's in that manner that we are here today to discuss the vote which happened almost a week ago. So the United Nations General Assembly held a vote against Russia-Ukraine the resolution, whereby actually 24 countries, have basically, I think we can say, denounced the Russian aggression on Ukraine, whereby we have 16 or 17 countries abstained, and 8 of them were not in the room, which is no record of vote. And one African country boldly who voted against the UNGA's resolution, joining, the rest of the 3 countries, meaning North Korea, Belarus, Syria, and that is Eritrea. So if we do the maths here, 25 countries actually are not in favor of this resolution, and statistically, again, that means 46% out of the 55 member states of the African Union. I hear one noise. I'm gonna mute you. So when you speak, I will put it on. So quickly, if you can address. Can we say that is Africa like sending a clear message to the Western world, namely US and Western Europe, its allies, that some kind of message, there are no more, with these blocks, we have Western Bloc and Eastern Bloc. What kind of message they are sending with this spot? But if we can translate it and analyze that. Let's start, with Mr. Abdurrahman.
Thank you, my sister Mahlet. And I'm really happy to meet my brother, Dr. Binyam. It's really interesting, actually, what's happening today. I think this conflict is unmasking a lot of hypocrisy when it comes to the Western world. When it comes to Africa, before I answer your question, Mahlet,
Yes.
let me maybe explain the institution of the UN. The UN, it's actually a very, very complex institution with many different levels. And what happened was a couple of days, the convocation of the General Assembly. Usually, General Assembly is convoked when there is a kind of a blockade at the Security Council. And as we know, within the Security Council, we have 5 countries who have a veto power. And then they presented a resolution to condemn the Russian government action in Ukraine, and then the Russian government vetoed. So then the US or the US government actually convoked the General Assembly. The funny thing is actually when the US convoked the General Assembly, before that, when other country, mostly from the south, were trying to use the General Assembly and were calling for a General Assembly so that they can vote on a resolution, the US were always the country that was opposing and refusing actually. But this time actually they convoked the General Assembly. And as you mentioned, actually 28 country, African country voted yes. And then we can say almost 26, the rest of Africa actually voted either by abstaining, either by not recording their vote, or actually voting against, which is actually one country, and which is the Eritrea. So it's true. It's showing actually that contrary to what the Americans are saying, they don't have actually the world behind them. And when we look into detail, the country who voted yes, we know already that these countries were pressured to vote yes. How can we say that? Because already the country who abstained, let put aside now the vote of Eritrea, which is really a very important message, and also the country that actually who totally actually were absent during this General Assembly, which is another strategy. But the country who abstain on this vote, they're already facing how to say sanction from, let's say, the big boss of the world, or the so-called big boss of the world, the US in this case. So if there was a true, I believe, if there was a true, transparent, and not actually behind the curtain pressuring strategy from the US and their and its allies, I believe actually that the majority of Africa will have voted against. So I will stop here, and I hope actually that during the discussion I will go specifically the Horn of Africa, because when we look the Horn of Africa, it's really interesting what happened in the Horn of Africa. We have actually 5 countries in the Horn of Africa, and it's really interesting. It's already showing actually that some of the resistance that's going on against American imperialism, but also it shows also like how deep sometimes the corruption of America and its allies have already done some damage to some East African or Horn of Africa country. Back to you, my sister.
Thank you, Brother Abdurrahman, for that. Yes, indeed, it's really interesting how the vote, even if when they say yes, there is of course something. There's a reason behind it. What's your take on the general, African countries' votes? How they performed, let's say, at UNGA, Dr. Binia.
It's also very nice to meet Abdurrahman. Yeah, it's a very interesting dynamics. Definitely, a new shift is taking place at the global scale. I know there are several African countries that voted yes to this resolution, but we know that it has been done under duress for many of them. Maybe very few, I think, would have said yes out of their own volition. In many instances, the content of that resolution has not given some countries a, a space to be able to exercise different votes. The reason why I'm saying that is some have their own internal challenges, secessionist movements. So if you say yes to, if you say no to this particular resolution that is exclusively blaming Russia, and also trying to pin this issue to a relation to a secessionist movement that Russia has unilaterally recognized. So, for example, Somalia will not be able to do that, yeah, because Somaliland exists there, and it's going to complicate its life, yeah. And aside from this, dynamics, there is an aid politics that go along with this as well. Many of them are dependent, and I don't know if Malawi would be able to say no to this. And considering that Russia is not significant, is not known to significantly contribute to development aid in the continent. Had it been China, it would have been a different story, yeah? Because China has a lot more investment. And even then, we know that the West has a significant leverage over many of African states who are significantly dependent on aid and international financial institution for for loans and all sorts of development assistance. And in lieu of this recent EU Africa summit that proposed this huge lump sum that's been dangled in front of African leaders, African leaders have to somehow think about, do we say yes to this, no to this and face the consequence, or do we say yes and then be able to benefit from those braids dangled in front of us? That's basically where this decision comes down. Those who have abstained obviously believe in this shift that's taking place at the global scale, that a multipolar world is emerging, and just pulling out from that and letting it unfold and let it formulate properly so that they benefit tremendously from that. A multipolar world is going to definitely benefit Africa. The problem is when there is severe competition and they turn Africa aside for their proxy war, which is going to complicate matters. But the UN, as we know it, has been very much manipulated by a US-led Western hegemony. Yeah, it's significantly impacted global politics, and UN as an institution, as a multilateral institution, it's been completely abused. Yeah? Its platforms. Remember, how many of resolutions against Israel had been blocked at the UN resolutions proposed, and the US had been blocking it, and not only in this General Assembly, yeah. But in other UN agencies as well. So this is very telling how hypocrite Western powers have been throughout this predicament. It is a global predicament. It affects all of us. We're all in it. So like we're not going to be affected by it, therefore we just sit back and watch this thing unfold. We are already being negatively impacted as a ramification of this conflict. Yeah. So we want a resolution, and we would like to see some positive steps to be taken in this multilateral platform. And through this platform, we should be able to get a peaceful, prosperous world. And that's what everybody's aspiration is. But obviously, it's been hijacked by Western powers, and particularly the US, and its desire to perpetually dominate the world. And that's not a tenable arrangement. And I think I'm going to leave it here. Thank you. Back to you, Mohammed.
Thank you very much. Really, that's another topic for another discussion. If it was China, it would have been different. I would love to hear that analysis. But again, of course, this aid is will be also problematic. I'm going to stay with you, Brother Biniam, for my next question. Tell me, as far as I think, if my memory serves me good, the relation between Eritrea and Russia, as far as I remember, wasn't that good. If I take, for example, when Eritrea was at war with Ethiopia for its independence, the government, the regime was helped, or the weapon was supplied by Russia, by the then Soviet Union, right? And also to some extent during the emperor time. And now, it's not abstain that it's a yes, that it's a no, that Eritrea voted. So, first of all, tell us, where does it stand right now, the relation between Eritrea and Russia, and what is the motive behind?
Okay. I think let me just give you the background. Yeah, Eritrea doesn't want to be bullied. That's it. It wants its foreign policy to be very much independent. Yeah, sovereignty. Yeah, it's the sovereign right. So it would want to make its policies. It wants to make its own decisions as it sees fit to its own set of conditions. That's the starting point for Eritrean foreign policy, as I understand it. Yeah, and of course internal policies as well. And it hasn't chosen any global powers. It has always been hesitant to engaging with global powers because it sees there is some kind of similarities within them. Yeah? And it has not rejected working with the US. It has always sought a good relation with the West. Yeah. The reason that the West never liked Eritrea's approach is because it is essentially saying, you're not going to bully me, irrespective of my size, irrespective of my condition, which is probably poor, not that developed, but you're not going to bully us. Yeah, you cannot tell us you know better than us what is our problem and how best to resolve that problem. Yeah, we need to learn to do it, and this is our right to do it. We fought for this. Yeah, so we fought against the U.S. Imperialism. We fought against USSR imperialism. So we're not going to give this to anybody. That's the starting point. So here in this saying no, they are actually recognizing that you are bringing this into this platform because you have hegemony over the UN, not necessarily because you have a valid case, and not that because you want to use this platform to address this problem, but rather to assert your hegemony. That's basically why you're using this platform. So Eritrea, in its explanation why it said no, and it did not pick a side, actually. It just said that Russia and Ukraine should be given the diplomatic space and other supportive mechanism in order to address their problem. So all this call it, the sovereignty and territorial integrity that's been acknowledged there in the resolution as well. Eritrea accepted that, but then it said no, because this is not the right platform. You haven't given even diplomacy any chance. You're just pushing it through this because you can manipulate this institution. And the unilateral sanction that the U.S. and the U.S. and the West in general has imposed on Russia, Eritrea rejected that. So its explanation says a lot more on why it said no to that particular resolution in that emergency meeting, extraordinary emergency meeting. And subsequent to that, Eritrea issued a statement. Yeah. Not the statement it made in the UN General Assembly, but outside of that, via its local medias, made a statement. And in that statement, it said that Ukraine is being used as a pawn in Western hegemony. Yeah, Ukraine is a victim here. Yeah, and in order to get to Russia. Yeah, so there's a lot. Nuance that needed to be extracted from this statement. And obviously, it's also making a statement. An African state can say no to you as well. And it did that in the Human Rights Council as well. Said no. And again, the only African state that said no in the UN Human Rights Council as well. So it's sending a message, but at the same time also making a case, a relevant case, why it should be rejected. Yeah, and it's not because it supports Russia against Ukraine or supports Russia against the US, but rejecting US's hegemony and the desire to create a crisis and try to manage it in order to advance its geopolitical interests. And that's what this whole situation is all about. Using Ukraine basically as a way to get back. Already there are politicians, the former politicians and current politicians are saying that they want to use Ukraine as Afghanistan #2. Hillary Clinton came out and said that. And who in his right mind would actually agree to this kind of proposal? Yeah? So I think Eritrea is saying that, please, my foreign policy, it's not going to be for sale. You give me aid or not, I'm not going to buy into that. I remember Eritrea only recently signed in with BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative. It has always said, no, let's wait, we're going to study it. Only recently, after, making a request of its own, and not only China coming in with its ambition, but Eritrea also coming with its ambition. Are you going to buy into this? So Eritrea is always looking for partnership, and Eritrea is always seeing that the world and its surrounding can only be peaceful by understanding the balance of power. So all of us, Ethiopia must play its role as a big country in the region. Saudi Arabia need to do that. Egypt need to do that. And all the others, not small, a big country, but all of us have a role to contribute, and we need to recognize that. And a global scale, the same thing. Wants China to have a role, wants Russia to have a role, wants the US to have a role. But that role must not be substituted. Local regional roles cannot be substituted with the big role that one global power wants to play, to dominate it. That has to be rejected at all times. That's the foundation to Eritrea's foreign policy, and I think this has come through strongly in this case. I give it to you, Mahle. Thank you. You're muted.
Thank you very much for saying that. I would have just continued. No, thank you very much. You wonderfully have laid it out so that it helps us to understand where it comes from and the relation between the two countries. I just want to confess this. One of the things that I have been saying with my African brothers and sisters is, ever since this UNGA resolution happened, is that, most of us, I think most of the people would share this view with me. Most of us as an African have been saying or imagining, Eritrea is that country, just very little, and with all this sanction and with all the labeling by Western media, no one would have wished, comparing our own country to be Eritrea. But this is one, event that actually all of us as an African wished that our leaders were as bold as Eritrea they were. This is one moment that everybody was rallying behind African people, Eritrea, saying, go for it. We are behind you. And I wish my government was, to make it simple, I envied Eritrea. I wish my government was that bold, but of course there are situations, and even when you say yes, it's not a yes. Yeah, just to read some of the comments out of here. That's what the neo-colonialists like. Africa is behind Eritrea against this Western capitalist bullying. That is Africa reimagined. He's my brother from Ghana. He's really good to take his YouTube out. He has a very good message usually. And also another comment from him is, one thing is, I encourage Eritrea to move closer to Ethiopia, Mali, Zimbabwe, and some of the Eastern African countries, and some African countries that are fighting against and, defeating this bullying. So coming back to you, brother Abdurrahman, one of the things that the resolution of Ukraine-Russia war unfolded is that how divided Africa was on the votes. But of course, there are motives behind it that can be analyzed. But on the social media, how most of the people really showed Africans with which side they are. They spoke for themselves. We are not going to that. But now, for our discussion purpose here, if we look at particularly the vote by the Horn of Africa, Eritrea, Ethiopia, and Somalia, so different. Ethiopia has totally chosen a different road. They were not in the room. Eritrea said no, and Somalia said yes. And just to give a bit of a background, it was these leaders of these three countries, some time ago or a few years back, who came together, and to define their own way of development and how they can, harness that regional cooperation in the Horn, bringing their own way without any influence from outside as it used to be. And that basically was what fired it has a backfire against Ethiopia, and US went to as far as sponsoring TPLF in this the past 16 months in the conflict that we are having now. Can we say that did the West manage, because they were against of this trio alliance in the whole? Can we say that they are successful? US is successful to to dismantle us because three of them now having a different vote? What's your take?
Thank you, Mahalet. The Horn of Africa vote at this UN General Assembly, it's really interesting. Let me mention a couple of elements. First of all, I totally agree with my brother, Dr. Binyam. I will also add that Eritrea alone again saved the honor of the African continent. Secondly, I was explaining before the construction or the way of functioning of the UN as a huge institution. resolution usually that are voted within the UN General Assembly doesn't have that much effect, despite the propaganda from America saying that they want the whole world behind them. It's totally incorrect. Already we can see the African continent, 28 countries who voted yes, and 27 countries who voted differently, but didn't vote alongside, let's say, the it already show the decline of the US imperialism when it comes to the African continent. But when you come back to the Horn of Africa, that's when things are really becoming interesting. You said rightly, Mahled, that 3 countries within the Horn of Africa, namely Eritrea, Ethiopia, Somalia, came together, and then they made a tripartite alliance, so they can develop their own country and be less intimidated by foreign interference, or let's say Western imperialism. When we look again at these 3 countries, we have Eritrea, who voted no, and as I said, actually saved the honor of the whole African continent. We have Somalia, who voted yes, and then we have Ethiopia, who totally was absent from the vote. People has to understand actually that these are different strategy, just also to let's say not face the full-blown attack of Western imperialism. When it comes specifically when it comes to the US, we are witnessing now almost like more than 10 days what they are doing in Eastern Europe. Can you imagine what these people are capable? There are no more hiding, actually. Their racism, even calling the assassination of foreign leaders, actually pressuring or actually sanctioning huge countries just because they exercise the rightful things by abstaining on this let's say joke at the UN. So again, people have to understand the UN, this resolution is not abiding, it's not that important. And then when it comes to Ethiopia, it was the best strategy not to be present because of what they did the last 2 years, when they were actually, all of them, they were cheering the return of the terrorists of the TPLF and saying they are actually very close to Addis Ababa, which was not true. And then you have Somalia. And my brother, Dr. Biniam, said rightly, Somalia is coming back from 30 years of civil war and destruction. And now the imperialists are actually are doing a lot of problems. Specifically now also Somalia is within a very sensible situation where there is a vote going on at the parliament. And then the American or the US government is supporting a secessionist regime to divide Somalia. While we are talking now, the US government actually is welcoming the secessionist regime in Washington. It shows you actually the different tools that are using to pressure different countries. So Somalia doesn't have any other choice but to vote yes. But what Somalia did was, knowing that this UN General Assembly was not binding, they voted yes. But at the UN Human Rights Commission of the UN, where the vote was more important, Somalia voted no. So it shows really, it's interesting. But let's talk also about the other country. So I don't believe actually the tripartite alliance is in jeopardy. I believe actually the tripartite alliance is much more stronger because what we can read through this different strategy when it comes to Eritrea, Ethiopia, and Somalia, that there is very, very close communication, and that there are actually they know actually the whole situation in the Horn, and then they have actually they are exchanging communication and information, and it was perfectly played. Eritrea, who voted no, Ethiopia, who was totally absent, and Somalia, who voted yes, but then at the Human Rights Commission of the UN voted no. Let's talk about the other circle or the other country in the Horn. We have Djibouti, a small country, totally occupied, colonized by the American, because they have their biggest military base in Djibouti, Conlé Monnier. And you have also like a dictatorial, totally corrupt regime there. And without surprise, Djibouti voted yes. And then you have Kenya. Kenya, who always tried to portray herself as an African country that has the interests of African in the heart, but her hypocrisy is coming out. Because not only Kenya voted yes, but also Kenya is member of the UN Security Council. Kenya is member of the 10 countries who are non-permanent seat, and Kenya shamefully defended the action of the American or the US government, and actually they criticized severely the action of the Russian government. I was happy actually to read immediately when they did that, the way the Russian government responded to the interference of the Kenyan government by saying, "End starvation in your own country before lecturing us on international dispute." Very short sentence, but clearly showing the corruption of the political elite today in Kenya. And it's not only Kenya, but many countries in the African. Let me continue when I go to other countries. You have Sudan, who abstain. You have South Sudan, who abstain. You have Uganda, who abstain. You have Tanzania, who abstain. Then when you look the Horn of Africa and the second line, or the bigger, let's say, Horn of Africa, you can see that actually not only the people has awakened, but actually there is an interesting political message that's coming from the Horn of Africa. I hope actually that this message from the Horn of Africa will also reach other part in Africa, but mostly will reach another institution that is totally fossilized, which is the African Union. We don't know why they are in Addis Ababa. We don't know why they are using all this money, and because you don't hear them, you don't see them. It's like a dead body. But the good thing is actually the people, the youths are awakened, and we still have a lot to clean up when it comes to the political level, especially when it comes to our African continent, but also the African Union. Thank you, Mahalet.
Thank you very much, Brother Abdurrahman. Really, yeah. If we look at, of course, the greater Horn, then the whole thing speaks something else. What do you think of this? Is of course for both. Maybe we go to Brother Binyam and then come back to Abdurrahman. You know, it's always this global power. Definitely, US is trying to be a unipolar. Globally, US and the West, there is always this Western bloc and the Eastern bloc, and Africa just have to choose either this or that one. Is this the way to go? Whether it's for the Horn of Africa or or for Africa as a whole, how can we define our relationship, to the rest of the world? Should we come with our own bloc, or we always have to choose either East or West, or should we have our own, like a Southern bloc? I don't know what to call it, but yeah, something of our own. What should be the way to go in terms of partnership? Because most of, if we look at Russia, its relationship in Africa it's like what they call it, mill to mill, military to military. They have countries that they have base, bases in some of the countries, and also they provide, some of their military companies provide weapons to some of African countries. And the US, the same thing. They have bases. If it comes to business, most of the businesses happens with China, and also to Europe, maybe to some extent with US. So, but this US and Russia versus thing is usually it's a military to military. How can we define ourselves and go forward for Africa? What's better? Because now we see Sudan, who agreed with Russia to have a military base there. What's the way forward? How can we define ourselves as an African in the face of the world? To you, whatever.
Thank you, Marlet. I just want to point out what my brother Abdurrahman has pointed out. Yeah, the users awaken. Yeah, that's a very important point, and I think we need to liberate our leaders now. Yeah, we need to liberate them, and I think that's where we need to focus on. Yeah, we spoke about African Union, why it's defunct. It's because it's dependent on Western money. Yeah. All its funding comes from Europe and North America, yeah, and Australia, probably a bit of Japan, and a bit from China, and that's not going down well for us as Africans, yeah. And not only African Union, all other institutions that we have, even states, are dependent on external funding. That's why you would see that they do not have independent policies, yeah? Whether it's internal or foreign policies. The internal policies are even worse because they geared toward us preparing our countries for exploitation. That's the kind of arrangement that has been established in Africa. And this will lead us to the very question you raised, whether to go east or west. Why do we have to do that? Yeah, we don't have to look outside powers to support us. We can support ourselves. The need for us to look inwards is ever more greater. Yeah. In fact, the danger there when we look east or west, then that we're going to turn ourselves into a site for their proxy wars. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the reason why Ethiopia probably just did not did not feature even in that meeting is because it didn't want to say, abstain or, siding with this or that one. If you abstain, then you're literally siding with Russia. That's how the West would read it. And there was a backlash. Even then, we have seen Ethiopia being bullied into making its position very clear. They had been bullying Sudan to make its position clear. And the barrage of assault on Eritrea, I think you have seen it. And they are all for us. Their media outlets, they're all coming out, in full force. So we don't have to look east or west. We can look what's based in each of those, yeah, and partner with them. If they want to partner with us, we accept it. This bullying, hegemony stuff that they want to impose on us, that has to be rejected. Yeah. The problem is our economies and our states are extremely addicted to this aid from the West, and each time they tell us about our economies growing, they tell us foreign direct investment. What does that mean? That means that the money that comes from Europe or North America invested here, or from the West, always looking outwards instead of looking at what we can do ourselves. Yeah, I'm not saying that we can avoid, that what's the noise outside. We cannot avoid some of the dynamics that exist at the global scale, but we need to learn to manage it. Yeah, and insist on partnership, insist on what works for us. Yeah. Now, what the US has done is they wanted to militarize Africa, and so that they will be able to control it. So military to military relationship. So the ranks The general would have a relationship with a US general, a colonel with a colonel. That's so. They over. In other words, they avoid any kind of a regulation on the relationship that they would have with those countries. So literally sidestepping the political process or any kind of regulatory framework that we would have, regulations that would govern foreign relations and other kinds of relations. Yeah. Now that's dangerous. And China comes with money, investment, of course, but then we need to also learn, how much of it can we use? Why are we going to so much dates with China? You can't just put all your eggs into one basket. Yeah, you need to learn. Local initiatives have to be supported in many ways. And what China can do in this continent is basically find a way to support that, or somehow make that relationship be able to support local initiative rather than just completely gobble them up. Yeah. And Ethiopia has done that effectively, and I think some other African countries have also tried to manage their relationship with the West and the East. And I think there is a lesson to be learned in each of instances in the Horn of Africa. Somalia is completely decimated, and rightfully, Brother Abdurrahman has pointed it out. And they turn that crisis into a perpetual one so that they manage it forever, and making it dependent on aid from the West, European Union, the US. Yeah, it's military. All parliamentarians are paid from, this money. That's a big problem. That means you don't have policy independence, right? You don't have independence of any kind, and that's what the West wants in general. And of course, I wouldn't say that China doesn't have that kind of aspiration, or Russia doesn't have that kind of aspiration. They might have, but they're not displaying it, at least not currently. Yeah, but definitely the West is using this to manipulate our state, impose its will on our countries, and that has to be rejected. So the best place to start is to actually see, local, regional. The Somalia Eritrea initiative was something that clarified them tremendously. Why? Because Ethiopia, Eritrea coming together, it's a huge block. Yeah. It's now going to incorporate Djibouti. It's going to incorporate Sudan, South Sudan are going to be embraced, and then eventually it's going to grow. Remember, already there is an East African community forming. Yeah, if that is strengthened and this conflict-ridden Horn Africa is also empowered, now who's going to regulate and monitor the Red Sea passage? All those countries come together to do that. Yeah, we don't need the Chinese military or US military to actually monitor those areas. We can do it ourselves. Why would powers from elsewhere come to sit in Djibouti and saying that they want to get rid of piracy, they want to get rid of drug trafficking and all human trafficking? We could do it ourselves. We can ensure our own safety and security. The primary responsibility is on us because this is our territorial waters. This is our region. We could do it. But then what they do is they divide us. Conflict between Eritrea and Ethiopia, stalking it, perpetually managing it. And of course, what's happening in Tigray is exactly that. Yeah, they want to continue to create conflicts in this region so that they would steer it to serve their advantage, weaken us, divide us, and eventually manipulate those spaces to serve their geopolitical objectives, whatever they might be. Now it's about getting rid of China from Djibouti. Of course, you need to understand where China is. China is at the chokehold. Yeah, Camp Lemonnier is at the bottom. The Chinese is just closer to where the gate is, literally. So the only way to get rid of China is actually weakening those states, probably even dividing Ethiopia, then eventually making Djibouti an irrelevant space, just and try to create regime change and forcing China to leave the Djibouti. That's the kind of strategy they're thinking. And of course, in Eritrea as well, the same thing. Eritrean government refused, any kind of military base for all countries, including Russia and all the others. And now they want to ensure a regime change take place, which would the new regime would probably be amenable to their diktats, and allowing the US to have a base. This is a very dangerous trend that we are seeing in our region over the last few years. And of course, it's not new. It has been perpetually happening for decades. Yeah, but it's time for us to say no more. It has to stop. A new relationship would have to be asserted and established. Yeah, established and asserted. And I think that's very important. We push for that. I give it back to you, Mahalet. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brother Binyam, for that analysis. Brother Abdurrahman, so what do you see the way forward? What's your take on this? For your quick comments. This block of here and there should
Thank you, Mahalet. Thank you, Dr. Binyam. I think can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
We hear you. Yes.
Perfect. Yes, we are in front of an amazing opportunity. We can see that in front of our own eyes, the world is changing from the unipolar world to a multipolar. And it's a good question where Africa will sit, or will Africa try to define its own vision, strategy, or will Africa again will be colonized? I think it's a very, very good question, an important question. I said before that what's going on in the Horn of Africa, it's interesting and can serve a lesson to the rest of Africa. I mentioned the tripartite alliance. And one of the reasons why the West and mostly the imperialistic are fighting us here in the Horn so hard is because they know that if the tripartite alliance is a success, it can be an amazing eye-opening for the rest of Africa. This tripartite alliance we can summarize as a building block. If the tripartite alliance is a success, then it can grow up to become the Horn of Africa, then the East Africa, and then you have West, you have the South, and you have the North. And slowly, Africa can build back their sovereignty. It's true, we are facing a lot of problems, not only the US imperialism, but also the former colonizer who totally destroyed our continent, who are still today talking with their double standard and their hypocrisy, what I call the syndrome of the blue-eyed blonde hair. So yes, we do have a lot of work in front of us. I believe that Africa should work more closely. And again, we do have a lot of, how to say, corrupt people. We do have a lot of traitor within our ranks, but slowly, slowly. For example, I remember Libya, when Libya proposed actually to have like an African currency, so that the continent can become free from the World Bank and the IMF. They destroyed that country. And who destroyed that country? It was NATO. They didn't even dare to go to the UN Security Council or the UN General Assembly. These institutions that they are running today, they were the same institution that they were actually yesterday not giving actually any importance. So I believe that actually this crisis happening today is a wake-up call for Africa, and Africa should strengthen their own ranks. Yes, I believe that actually we can learn a lot from China as well as Russia. We can learn from China, for example, how the Chinese, they prepare themselves to become totally sovereign. For example, they build their own financial system, and it's paying off today. They build also their own internet. It's paying off. I believe actually the same initiative was raised recently in Ethiopia by the Ethiopian parliament to have their own internet as well as financial new mechanism. I believe, yes, that's one of the way for the African continent. We can learn a lot from Russia. Today, the Russian government actually decided to totally put a hold on raw resource exportation. This is our reality in the African continent. Even 50 years after the colonization, we still continue to export our resource. I believe that what this step taken by the Russian should be a strategy taken by African country, totally stopping actually the export of raw material. But actually, this raw material should be transformed within Africa, within each country, then actually exported, but not the raw material. So again, yes, we have a lot to learn from both Russia and China. And these two countries, again, I will say, Russia and China, they never colonized the African continent. But today, when we listen to the propaganda or prostitute media of the West, it's looked like it was the Russian who colonized us, and it was the Chinese who enslaved us, which is totally false. So yes, it's time for Africa to wake up, and this strategy of building block, we should actually fasten it, because the world actually is going fastly into a multipolar, and to all the corrupt people or the traitor who are still counting on the blue-eyed, blonde-haired former colonizer or the American imperialistic boat, that West is sinking. You still have time to change board and come back to your countries and to your continent and help us actually become more sovereign within our continent and within our countries. Back to you, Mahlet.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Brother Abdurrahman, for that. Just in case for our viewers, if somehow our discussion kind of inclined supporting Russia, this is not, that shouldn't be automatically equated to that we are supporting or I'm supporting a war in Ukraine. But we are, as a Pan-African platform, we are looking at things, what it unfolded, this war between Ukraine and Russia for Africa. So that's where our interest lies, and to define for Africa what's next, because the level of racism, the arrogance that we have seen, by the mainstream media, by FIFA, all these international sports organization, can I call them, banning the Russians and, putting people to make a sign for Ukraine. That unfolded. What about the people who were dying in Somalia, in Libya? What about the people in Palestine? Are they not human beings? So that is the thing we are trying, the hypocrisy, the double standard of the United Nation in its approach of this war. And I think also, for me, what this war reminded us, the UN approach is that, it's the same countries. If we look at them now, under the name NATO, the same country who came, who sit in Berlin, scrambled for Africa and went and colonized. It's the same. I mean, the majority, we can say, country that went and destroyed the Black people, the Aboriginals in Australia, the Red Indians in the US, and to our recent memory, all the wars that happened in the last few decades in Afghanistan. It's all the same flags or nations that have done this. So sometimes I wonder, and I've been asking in my last interview, is Russia, fighting an Africa war? Because it's all, seems the same. You may comment on that, but I'm going back to Brother Biniam, asking, what do you think that Africans, should learn from Eritrea? What can we learn? You can bring, it has not been an easy road, definitely, to reach to this point. It's not something, as I always say, freedom is not free. Yeah, that says a lot. Yeah, what can we learn?
Thanks, Marlet. I think there are very important points to be raised by you and Brother Abdurrahman. Obviously, it's not about supporting Russia or Ukraine, and Russia is not fighting an African war. Russia is fighting hegemony, that is meant to be imposed on it, it's doing it to its own interest, So Africa also needs to learn that, what's our interest and how do we promote that, not at the expense of others. And what we don't like about US's kind of hegemony or desire to dominate the world is it is trying to do it at the expense of all of us and to the benefit of the very few. It's not even to the benefit of the majority of Americans. It's the minority that are meant to benefit from this. The oligarchy. They are being supported through this kind of domination. And what we don't like, again, is the ways in which they weaponize everything. Institutions, global institutions, cultural institutions, all of them are weaponized, and that is what we are rejecting. When we point out the hypocrisy, we're saying that those institutions are being weaponized. It's not because they like Ukrainians, it's not because they care so much about them, but it is rather to promote their objective. What's their objective? They could, we cannot, with all seriousness, say that they are doing this because they care about these people. If they care about these people, they would have stopped the war. They would have stopped the war long time ago. This is a war that has been festering and escalating over the last 8 years or so, probably even longer. With all its historical complexities, but we need to recognize that this is not something that happened only a few weeks ago. It has been festering for a long time. The West has been asked to, somehow assist in this, particularly the European Union. But obviously, the European Union's policies have been hijacked by the US, and its desire to cajole Russia. And they want Russia to fall so that they go for the Chinese. So the end game is China, Not even Russia. Russia is just on their way to going to China. So that's a very dangerous game that they're trying to play. It's very, very dangerous. Yeah, and a massive scale. So all these Nazis are being mobilized in the Ukraine. It's to achieve all that. Okay. Anyway, so I think we need to recognize the context and why we say no to it. Coming to Eritrea. Eritrea, the famous saying in Eritrea, it's born in defiance and exists in defiance. Yeah, it's born out of defiance and it exists and continues to exist in defiance. That's what Eritrea is in short. It's a borrowed phrase, by the way. So what Eritrea has been doing is it has recognized early on that if we go for aid and try to ameliorate our pains, we're not going to go far. So let's just do away with aid. Why do we do away with aid? Not that it doesn't help, but it actually keeps you hostage. It puts you in an intensive care, literally, critical care. It just gives you what you need, but it doesn't allow you to move forward. That's what aid does. And of course, you become perpetually dependent on those who are giving you this aid. Yeah. So it recognizes that. So you want policy independence, internal and foreign policy independence, then you must cut away aid. And it has tried it. I mean, there are a lot of agencies that came trying to assist, and the World Bank and the IMF came early in the 90s, and they said, they want to write policy documents for Eritrea. And then Eritrean leaders said, of course, fresh from, guerrilla just became government, and they said, why can't we write a policy ourselves? Why do you want to write a policy for us? You think you know poverty in Eritrea better than we do? Or what is it, Just so leave it there. We're going to do it ourselves. And that didn't go well with IMF and the World Bank. You must know that. And to this day, they have no relationship with IMF. The World Bank, they have borrowed money. Obviously, Eritrea is not saying no to aid, but local initiative must take priority, and any aid must be enabling that. So Eritrea early on recognized it, with maybe other African countries came a bit later. Yeah? So in order to assert its independence, in order to chart its own path for development, it wanted to look inwards. That's what we call a self-reliance approach, which has been experimented in different places. But Eritrea wanted to do it not as a massive scale. I'm sure you guys remember the Ujama villages the late Nyerere had initiated. It was a state-run project, obviously, but a massive one, trying to get people to move into agricultural villages, yeah, and using that to modernize Tanzania. That was the aspiration. But obviously, it was done on a massive scale, became problematic. So what Eritrea is doing is basically, don't rush us. We're going to do it, but we're going to do it small scale and experimenting little by little. And all relationships you see also, it's little by little. So with Ethiopia, Somalia, didn't come up with a grand plan. Let's do this ABCD. Let's do small. Somalia, Eritrea, Ethiopia. Then slowly build a block. Yeah. Yeah. So everything must not be rushed. It must be done so that there will be lesson learned. Yeah. Small lesson learned. So this is one aspect to it. The second aspect to it is Eritrea refuses to be seen as a small country, yeah, a poor country. It wants a self-definition. It wants to assert its self-definition. Don't tell me I'm poor, yeah. I might not have enough resource, but don't define me as poor first, yeah. Don't define me as small. I have enough resources. I can contribute. Let me define myself. That's a different way of thinking about states in Africa. Big countries like Congo are defined as weak, right? Why? That's a definition that is imposed on us. Yeah. So Eritrea is just rejecting that. I have a contribution to make. we have a contribution to make. Small or big countries could make that kind of contribution. This is the second. Third one is Eritrea has always wanted to let internal processes shape outcomes, and internal processes must have must be given a space to mature organically, and it has paid a price, significant, a heavy price for it. It's in Somalia, when everybody wants to intervene, it refused to accept that and wanted Somalis to do it their own way in order to change their own conditions. Yeah, if everybody wants to come in and somehow put their hands, just not going to work. Yeah, they would just make a mess of it, and it has been proven time and again. But Eritrea paid a heavy price for that kind of stance. Yeah, the West wanted to use Eritrea to promote its interest in the region. Eritrea refused. Yeah, we need to work together as neighbors. We don't want this kind of arrangement using one state against the other. We're not going to accept that. And internal processes must organically mature, and people will know, and people will find a way and a wisdom to address their own challenges. And Eritrea also believes that this is what we have to have as well, and which the West and its imagination of an African country, and for that, a very small in their minds, should not be allowed to do that. And the West must come and tell us to do this in politics, to do this in our economy. Eritrea rejected all that. And I think those are the things that other African countries could learn. And of course, Africa is rich with resource, it has young population, and increasingly becoming educated. This is an asset that can be mobilized in order to transform our economies. But we need to do it piece by piece, brick by brick. You can't just go for Rome wasn't built overnight, and a state building has to happen bit by bit. The last task that Eritrea has been invested in is nation building. We need to build our nations, and nation building in the sense that we need to somehow whittle out subnational sentiments. Yeah, we need to learn to live as citizens, to cooperate, to work together. Yeah, live in peace and harmony, and that is a nation building project that's not being implemented in many parts of Africa. This is something that we have to embrace. The fifth one, and probably a contentious one, a political class that is committed, to the future of that country. So the kind of sacrifices. So this generation, including the leaders and their children, must sacrifice for the better future of the generations to come. So sacrifice now in order to have a better generation tomorrow. Many might belittle, why is this president, invested in building dams, going to rural areas, small roads. What's the significance? It has a major significance. Now it's going back to the basics. Yeah, it's going back to the basics. They could build stadiums. They could build, all sorts of entertainment parks. Yeah. But they say the priority is food. The priority is water. Yeah, we need to protect an environment, which we are living in a very tenuous environmental region, and a very difficult region. So we have to harness all those resources and protect them and invest it today, so that future generation would have a better inheritance. Yeah, intergenerational contribution of it. That's what they have been doing, and they continue to do. You would see them like driving old Toyota Corolla, probably government owned as well. They live in government-owned houses. Unheard of in Africa. I know how African leaders and their convoys travel around their cities and villages. Yeah. come election time, what they do, we know that, yeah. But in Eritrea, they have avoided that. That meant that every little resource that they get, they're investing in that. And of course, that doesn't mean that Eritrea is, it's great. There's so many challenges, mistakes have been made along the way. I mean, this is very natural, yeah. But only the people who are doing, yeah, active, that could be involved in making mistakes. And if you're sitting, then you probably won't make a mistake. They do make mistakes, but they try to learn from it. And I think that's what I appreciate from Eritrean leaders and what Eritrea is doing. And I think that would be something that others could learn from it as well. Thank you very much, Mohammed. I give it to you now.
Thank you.
I
Thank
think
you.
I probably
Very,
said it too much.
no, but it was really important. I'm very happy that you took the liberty to let them out, and I definitely it's a topic by itself to discuss. I mean, I really hopefully you will be part of it. I want to organize from the resilience of Eritreans and Eritrea as a nation, as a state. What can we learn to pass through under that sanction all these years? There must be something to learn, definitely. Yeah. Let me just read some of the comments here. We are coming to an end. Yeah, we can and should solve our own problems instead of looking outside. No one can put our house in order except ourselves. Yeah, internal processes shape outcome. And then, nation building, working together. I think that is a word, nation building. I mean, it's really, again, it's another topic which takes time, but that's what it is, because we can do, as you said, here and there projects, but again, if there's no generation to take over, if you don't build a nation that has a love for its country to continue those national projects, then what do? Again, it's faced with the same challenge, because we have seen history has told us, our challenges are not unique. It has happened before, it's happening, and it will happen again, because every time we claim, our own narrative, our own way of development, there are challenges that we are facing. But again, if you don't build a nation, then who is there to take over? And how also new developmental projects can continue in the future? Yeah, we have to, I think, invest on the youth, really. That's otherwise our challenges become this vicious circle. Every time you have to deal with the adults, and then the children can become again adult. You have to, yeah, it's really important. So maybe I had one final question for Brother Abdurrahman. Here he is. And just add to him. Brother Abdurrahman, you hear me? You hear us? You hear me? Abdurrahman?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I can hear you.
You ready?
Sorry, I'm starting to lose internet, but I hear you. Yes.
Okay, now it's to the final, actually, the final question. You have touched upon it.
Yes, I can hear you, Mahalet. Can you hear
Good.
me?
Okay. Yes. This question is for you.
Yes.
You have touched it before.
But I didn't hear your question. I don't know if you asked it me.
No, I'm going to say it. I just wanted your attention and to alert you that the question I'm going to say is for you. Yeah. Okay. So, this whole thing that unfolded in front of us has actually, there are always opportunities, out of challenges. And one thing that has happened in this Ukraine versus Russia war is that for Africans to define there's an opportunity, at least once for them to come to unite and denounce what they have to denounce and say, no, we are not going to side with you. We are not going to side with other. We have actually our own demands. We are going to define our own needs and, our own way. But without doing that, it looks like it's going to pass us. What should we do? I mean, okay, there are leaders and there are ordinary people, but at least do you share my view? There is an opportunity for these leaders, for Africa, to come together at least for once and make a voice, a united voice, on their stance, how they are treated and how these Western blocs or whatever are treating the rest of Africa. What do you say? What do you think is that opportunity, and what should we do? What can we take forward? What is the opportunity out of this challenge for us? You're muted, and you muted yourself. I cannot unmute you from my side. We cannot hear you. We can't hear you, Abdurrahman. Do you hear me?
He's in.
Sorry. He's muted from him.
Yeah, he's muted, but also, okay, I think he came back now. Just ask him to unmute.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Mahlet,
Okay.
for the questions.
All right.
I think my brother, Dr. Biniam, am I?
We hear you. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
No?
No, we do hear you.
It's good.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
we hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear
Yes,
you.
we do.
He cannot hear us, I believe.
We do hear you.
Can you hear me, Mahlet?
Yes, I hear you, Abdurrahman. We hear you. You, Abdurrahman, are you there? Brother Abdurrahman? He's freezed, maybe. I think let's yeah, maybe better to try. What we can do is perhaps he probably will log in again. Sorry for that little technical problem, but at least he made it this far, regardless of internet problems. I will give you a chance, Brother Biniam, maybe to say your final words.
Okay. Maybe this is something that we should have raised early on. Yeah. It's been this whole issue has been framed as Ukraine-Russia conflict, but it's not actually. Yeah, if you look at war by other means that have been waged against Russia, the US had been involved in for over the last few years. We've seen it, and we cannot say this is a Ukraine versus Russia. It is a US versus Russia. Ukraine is just being used as a pawn in this process. And we've seen that in many parts of the continent as well, where proxy wars has been waged by big powers, big global powers and regional powers as well, emerging powers. The Saudis and the UAEs, the Qatar, UAE, trying to manipulate one political leaders over another. We have seen that, So this is, not that different from this. It's just that it is happening at the bigger scale, So we need to recognize that. And how is this going to impact Africa? Africa is going to be negatively affected by this whole predicament. Not only there is a prospective World War III, which everyone agrees that should be avoided at all costs. But the ways in which this is being pushed, propagandized, and those who citing the agenda are pushing a very dangerous message. I listened to Deutsche Welle, and what they say in BBC, and people will come to CNN, and the ways in which they characterize those issues, it's so scary. They seem to be thinking that it's a good idea for a World War III to take place. Some of them are pushing that kind of agenda. It's very dangerous. Now, what's the difference between, where do you draw a line between, sending troops and weapons to facilitate a war in Ukraine? Where does it end? They are openly talking about that, and they're openly talking about dragging Russia into this conflict, and eventually Russia would collapse. That's the kind of aspiration that they have. Russia would probably see a different outcome from this, and obviously tries to work towards that. But you have to understand Russia is also being cornered. It has been humiliated. It has been pushed, sanctioned. It has tolerated the West, and it is in an attempt to be a part of the European Union security architecture and economic integration. So that Euro-Asia integration that Russia has aspiration, and of course the Germans had bought into this and had been working towards that very hard and for so long, and invested so much money in this and so much energy. And the West, the US had torpedoed that through this conflict, and which we have to recognize. And many Germans are in fact bitter, yet you would find people who come to media, I don't know who buys them, I don't know who actually funds them. They come into this media, major media platforms, and propagandizing war, promoting war. And prospect of World War III seems to be inching and sneaking closer and closer. That's very dangerous. And of course, the ramification, economic ramification, the supply chain, the oil price going up, food becoming short supply, all that is going to affect all of us, wherever we are. An integrated world that's working toward this peace and prosperity would have been a much better thing for Africa. This rivalry, it's not good for Africa. I suspect that they're going to come for resources in this continent and the domination of the African states, so that they continue to loot, and they're going to turn Africa into proxy wars. We started to see signs, and Africa better prepare to avoid this disaster. should avoid being a pawn. It should have its own independent policy and assert its position, and not be used by one or the other to advance, to push one or the other. It shouldn't be about that. It should be equal partnership. If Russia allows that, and we go with Russia. Yeah, when America is ready to be an equal partner, then we go with the US. Not that by abandoning China, but rather also working with China. What's wrong with working with China? It must be our choice and our prerogative to choose who we partner with, who we work with. Yeah, some politician in the US should not make that decision on our behalf. And of course, that American politician is also making this decision on behalf of somebody else. We know that, yeah, somebody else who pays his funding, funds his campaign, all the rest, so just the mouthpiece of somebody up in the top, So we need to recognize this is the situation. It's a dangerous one, and it's going to affect us negatively, but we need to learn to navigate this, sail this carefully. Yeah, we must walk very gently, very slowly, and of course asserting ourselves. Yeah, ever more strongly. And we need to say, no more to this kind of manipulation. We say no more to weaponization of all sorts of institutions, even human rights agenda. We have seen the hypocrisy. Now they're telling us about not respecting media rights, but then RT is being just dropped from European Union, no access to RT. Like one side must dominate the propaganda. They have propaganda as well. The BBC is not there to tell us news. It's propagandizing news, yeah, to serve the British imperial aspiration. And then the same thing would be RT, but then the people should have a choice to this and that, yeah. But now they want to silence the other because they can, and that they have been doing to us, Africa, demonizing our leaders. Whenever we have progressive leaders, they have demonized them. Whenever we have and then as soon as they die, then they want us to celebrate them. They don't mind us celebrating them. Yeah, they would even organize a T-shirt for us. Yeah, once they died. But when they're alive, then they continue to demonize us and remind us we should also take part in that. So this should be rejected. We need to recognize who is progressive leader, who's working for the interests of this continent, and I think most importantly, the citizens need to wake up and start pushing this agenda themselves. Not be used by somebody else, but use their energy, their motivation, their resources to liberate themselves and their leaders. And I see some of their leaders are in a very difficult position. Sometimes we as citizens can actually facilitate that, And those who go to the UN, they've been bribed, or they will be told, they would get this much funding if they vote this. And even kind of arm twisting, we seeing intimidation, not only just arm twisting with money, we'll do this and do that, dealing and wheeling. No, intimidation. Yeah. And we've seen this in UN platforms, and this is not acceptable. And UN is not working for our interests, and African Union, the same thing. So we have to advocate for independent African Union, independent institution that we should cultivate in the continent. And when we say independent, not in the name alone, but also in deeds and in practice, we should fund it, we should facilitate it, we should coordinate it and own it. Yeah. If somebody else from elsewhere comes, and I'll give you a very simple example. IGAD has elaborate projects. Yeah, the ones that get funding, it reflects immediately Western prerogative. The security part gets funding. The environment part doesn't get funding. Why? Because the Western priority is that. But IGAD recognizes that there is an environmental challenge we face in that region, and that has to be addressed. But hardly any money comes to that. So, whenever we depend on them, then we're not going to address our problem. We just only be used as tools to their projects. Yeah, so we need to come to what is good for us, work towards that without having to look outside. Yeah, I think I have said enough. Thank you very much for providing this platform. I'm much appreciated.
Thank you very much. I always say that for me to sit behind the screen is really always to learn from my guests, from my brothers, my sisters. I just love it. It's like a research, I like when I do research, and you always learn when you sit in front of your, participant, and it's like, yeah, it's breathtaking for me. I like it. So thank you very much for your time, and definitely we will meet again. There's a lot to share. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you very much. Yeah, we
Our
just missed the opportunity from Abdurrahman's last words.
The last words, but definitely he was there. I mean, he's a good friend of Connect Africa, so we will meet again. There's a lot happening in our region, so we will meet again. That's unfortunate, but yeah. So those of you who are not a family of Connect Africa, please be a family, and it's all about spreading the good word. You wouldn't get, such information and knowledge that you have here if you are a Pan-African, of course. So please be a family, subscribe, and spread the knowledge, spread the words. That's the most important thing. Whatever at least the least we can do is, to share the knowledge, to create that, to keep the frequency. There's, as Brother Abraham said before, there's awakening, an awakening that really you cannot deny. I mean, it tells us a lot. It's the era of digital media. There's a lot of information shared by people, so that is something that we can leverage out of it. So keep that vibration, that frequency, keep informing the people. That's the least we can do, but of course we should act on it. Teach the youth, invest on the children, please. Wherever you are, invest on your children. Teach them. The school will not teach them about African history. Teach them, to have that self-dignity, to have that respect for themselves, to teach them their history. So that's kind of my ritual in when I do my outro. I always to remind my people, to really invest on the youth. Have a good evening, and thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.